Hello everyone, I'm Mike D'Angelo with That's Entertainment, and this is your retro review of Actraiser by Quintet. As gamers, we're used to titles that require little to no risk. Back in the 80s and 90s, you were hard-pressed to see a brand new franchise push new boundaries. If you didn't have a mascot to lean on, the thought of trying something fresh yet challenging didn't exactly work well for the confidence of a developer or publisher. Actraiser took a different route than most games. It married two different styles of gameplay, a more strategic overworld with a traditional side-scroller base. It was a considerable risk given the relatively unknown reputation of Quintet at the time. But, with all that Actraiser set out to do, was it worth the risk? While there were plenty of games that came out during the Super NES era that focused on religious themes, perhaps none so fiercely tackled the material as Actraiser. And certainly no other game at the time put you in the shoes of the deity. That deity is the Master, who was defeated by the evil Tanzara and forced to retreat and mend his wounds. That recovery took longer than expected, and the Master fell into a deep sleep. Unfortunately, during that time, Tanzara and his minions were able to corrupt the land, and the people fell into despair. So much time has been spent in darkness that no one believes the Master exists. To gather his power, the Master must help restore the faith of the people. By rebuilding the civilization and heeding their prayers, they will invigorate him. This will lead him back down the path of the Dark Tanzara and his lieutenants, where he can finally put right all the wrong that has plagued the world. While you never see the deity of the game, you do control his avatars. The city-building portions of the game revolve around one of the Master's cherubic angels, while the platforming sections put you in control of an animated statue. During the overhead simulation, the primary goal is to encourage your people to grow. The more you utilize your powers of divine intervention, the better their chances of survival and expansion. These miracles are rewarded as the total population increases, leading to the Master leveling up and bestowing an increase in health to his statue avatar. Bookmarking each of the building simulations, there are action sequences that require the Master to control a statue, utilizing it in defeating a horde of enemies, and finally, one of Tanzara's lieutenants. Actraiser's variety led to some very interesting art choices. The game never feels like it dwells too long on any one style, especially thanks to the dichotomy of its two modes. Each of the gameplay types has their own pros and cons though. The platforming portions of the game are beautifully detailed, but sometimes it feels as though the sprites are too big to be convenient. Instead, it's almost as if you can be surprised at any one point because of how crowded the screen is. On the other hand, in spite of the rather large sprites, everything moves very fluidly and is animated quite well. Once you move to the overhead gameplay, you get almost the opposite feeling. The screen is big and open, as is usually the case with a simulation game. The fluidity seems to break away slightly here though, and feels just a little clunkier. The music, however, is strong throughout. It does what it sets out to do, leaving you with relaxing melodies during the city building portion or upbeat battle tempos whenever you enter combat as the statue. This was Quintet's second game, and led to some of their massive hits like Illusion of Gaia, Soul Blazer, and Terra Enigma. The game was ridiculously well received in Japan, selling 400,000 copies. Despite the religious overtones, which typically held Nintendo games back somewhat, the game sold decently in the US as well. A port was made for the Nintendo Super System arcade platform, and Square Enix released it over a decade later for mobile phones. Both of these ports were stripped of the town building modes, and are generally considered inferior. While Actraiser managed to defy expectations and show that it was worth the risk, its legacy was left slightly askew. The overworld management portions of the game were what ultimately made it as charming and captivating as it was. Though it was well received by the industry, it seems the developer had less confidence in its specific style, as the sequel stepped away from what made the original so unique. Even so, the original was captivating enough to remain notable for its impressive qualities.